Hey everyone, welcome to 3 Beers Deep for, it is Monday, May 25th. We're so close to E3, and I'm actually recording this on Memorial Day because doing some family stuff on Sunday, ran out of time, didn't have a chance to record 3 Beers Deep. And even though I have today off, I wanted to make sure that this got up because I enjoy answering your questions each week. I enjoy having a conversation with everyone, so we're going to do that. One thing I want to address up at the front is to put in context a little bit of something that happened on Friday, carried out onto Sunday, and now I want to, here on Monday, sort of put it to bed and talk a little bit more about it. But in case you aren't aware, on Friday I ran my Worth Reading column, which I run every week at Kotaku. Is a feature I started at Giant Bomb, in which I find it important to try and signal boost interesting work that is being written by other people. I find myself these days having a pretty enormous megaphone platform, whatever you want to call it, in which I'm able to write and speak to an audience, you know, whether you're talking about Giant Bomb or Kotaku or my Twitter account. I have access to lots of amazing readers and followers, subscribers that trust me to pass on interesting work to them. And so Worth Reading was born out of this idea that I read all this amazing stuff every week. Is there a way to get more eyeballs on that? And it was just a little thing that I try and give back to the community. It takes very little time to put together, and I get a lot out of it. And it's so heartwarming to pass on the amazing words and essays and criticisms of various folks that aren't in a position like I am, but maybe I can kind of point some eyeballs their way and maybe help them push the ball up the hill a little bit. So that's where Worth Reading came from, you know, as a desire to promote work that maybe wasn't being seen by as many people as I think it should. And so that started at Giant Bomb, came to Kotaku, and one of the things at Kotaku is that the way we write headlines is very different from the way I've written headlines in the past. And we'll get to, there's a separate question about that I'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into my thoughts on that and some of the things I've struggled with in the transition to working at Kotaku. But anyway, so Worth Reading on Friday ran with a headline called Some Kickstarters Are Lying About Game Budgets, in which it highlighted an article that ran in Polygon last week that discussed the notion of how Kickstarter projects are changing, especially for video games, in which some Kickstarters are asking for less money than what they actually need for the project for a variety of reasons. For example, Koji Igarashi has said that 90% of the funding for Bloodstained, I think that's the name of his game, is going to come from outside funding and not from Kickstarter. I put an image of Yooka-Laylee in there because it's a game that's going to cost millions to develop, and it's not going to. The amount they've asked for on Kickstarter is not the amount that it will cost to make the game. And I used a headline that was not just disingenuous, but was factually inaccurate. They are not lying about it. They have stated how they're going about their funding. It might be slightly below the fold, you know, in a FAQ or in a video, but it's being mentioned. It's not being hidden. It's not a sleight of hand on the side of the developers. And what my headline accused was that's exactly what they were doing. Now I stand by the sort of concern that game budgets are being slightly skewed by some of these Kickstarter projects because games are expensive to make. And if we sort of describe the way that games cost or instill this idea of the way the games cost as being lower than they actually are, it does potentially make it more difficult for crowdfunding in the future, because when people possibly ask for exactly what they need, you may look at that and go, well, these other guys didn't need this much money. Why do you need this much money? Can't you make it work like the other people did? And I think that can lead to a skewed notion of how much it costs to make games. Because I think we still, even though crowdfunding has made it better, we don't know how much games cost. Games cost a ton of money to make, and I think that makes a lot of people uncomfortable because I think we have this notion that it doesn't cost that much. So anyway, I wanted to formally apologize to the developers at Playtonic for implicating that they were lying about that, you know, also to Koji Igarashi and the team over there. My pursuit of a headline that would get people to click on these articles that I want desperately more people to read led to a situation in which I overreached, and that happens. But I think, you know, what I noticed on Saturday was I was getting a barrage of tweets about it from a lot of people that explicitly were associating with Gamergate. And so my original feeling was to look at that, roll my eyes, and move on, because I have found that within Gamergate there are often situations where when someone makes a mistake, it is seized upon, possibly as evidence of a vast conspiracy. And so it's easy on my part or anyone's part when a mistake is pointed out, your natural inclination is to shrink back and go and be defensive. I'm like, oh, I'm right. Like, this is the reason I did this, and I'm totally fine. And I could feel myself doing that. I could feel myself looking at a barrage of tweets from people that I vehemently disagreed with, and going, those people can't have a point. It obviously cannot be the case that we are going to see eye to eye on this, and I'm fine. But then I saw, Grant Kirkhope, who's the composer of Banjo-Kazooie, a game series that I've loved. He's the composer of Yooka-Laylee, and he felt that the article that I was linking to made some valid points and was kind of interesting, and was certainly something to consider about how Kickstarter is used for game projects. But that the headline was disingenuous, it was factually incorrect, and that upset him. And he's totally right. And so I talked about it with my editor, Steven Totillo. We went over it, decided, you know what, the right thing to do is to change this, is to modify the headline and to explain what exactly happened, why we did it. And when someone like Grant Kirkhope says that, it makes me think. And he was totally reasonable about how he proposed it, and he was kind and considerate when we explained that we had made a mistake, and we tweeted it to him, and he was like, thank you for acknowledging it. Like, it was a really nice process, because when mistakes happen, it is important to learn from them. When mistakes happen, it's important to admit they happened, why they happened, but also realizing that mistakes do happen and not letting that, I don't want that to stop me from making strong declarative statements or having a strong opinion in the future, because that is important to me, and I do have those. And just because you make a mistake, I think sometimes that can make you not feel defensive, but that, well, why would I want to put my neck out there another time? Because I just, having everyone crowd around it and call for your head is stressful. But I'm hopefully not going to do that, because why I'm belaboring the point here, why I'm explaining what happened, is because it is important for me, I think, to discuss this openly and admit that you can make mistakes, that at the volume of articles that I write, stuff's going to happen and missteps are going to happen. But, the best thing you can do is get in front of it and be like, you know what, this was wrong. These people had a point. And that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. I think that's the hang up that happens for a lot of people, is that it isn't okay to make mistakes, or that when you make mistakes, it's better to be defensive and pretend no one else has a point, because it's hard to admit you're wrong. And then especially if people maybe you disagree with are pointing out that you made a mistake, you feel the need to kind of just point the middle finger at them. And, this was a case where I did make a mistake, and I'm not happy it happened, but I'm happy to learn from it. And I think that's the important point. So all that aside, let's get to your questions as I take a sip of this coffee. Whew. Confessions time. Asinines asks, hello Patrick, without asking for a prophecy here, do you think that middleware games will eventually cease to exist due to the increasing cost of developing polished looking games and the ever-rising cost of marketing said games? Indie and AAA games are all the rage these days, but is there ever going to be any room left for middleware games down the road? So I don't think he means middleware as much as he means sort of like not quite AAA, not quite indie, but games that are kind of right in the middle. Games that like THQ was famous for making for a number of years. I think what we're less likely to see are games that aspire to be AAA but are slightly below that. But what's more likely are games that are indie that kind of look a couple notches above what we expect from stuff like that. Look at Firewatch, right? Like, that's an indie game. But man, you look at it and it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it looks like it's punching above its weight. And partially that is a result of talent leaving bigger developers and entering the indie space, and also technology enabling indie developers to do more with less. So I think we're going to see the sort of the re-emergence of games of that type, but they're going to happen from the bottom up as opposed to the top down, because it's easier to scope and budget for stuff that's cheaper and smaller, but maybe you're capable of pulling off more, as opposed to saying we're gonna try and hang out with Gears of War and make a Gears of War light. And I think this is really exciting, right? Because it means we're going to get richer, more ambitious games that we might not have gotten before, because I think technology and talent are combining for an opportunity there. And then also it's possible to sell stuff like that. It's possible to do Kickstarters to raise money for stuff like that. So there are more avenues than ever before, which I think the traditional way those types of games have been made is gone, but I don't think they're gone forever. They're just in a different form. Anonymous asks, Tumblr won't let me link, but Google refrigerator full of Super Nintendo Jurassic Park games. Was it you who bought this? I got a lot of links to this over the weekend, in which someone on eBay is selling a refrigerator full of, I think, Jurassic Park SNES cartridges, which is kind of amazing. I wish I had a couple $1,000s to buy it. Hopefully it sells to someone and it's real and not a hoax, because I do want to believe that somewhere out there is a man with a refrigerator full of Jurassic Park games. That warms my heart. That makes me a happy human being to think that might be true. So fingers crossed. While Daring Greatly asks, what do you think is more likely at this point? AC Rogue on PS4 or free on games for gold in the future? I think it's possible that Ubisoft will end up bringing AC Rogue in some fashion like that. I wouldn't be surprised if they used AC Rogue as a way to maybe start ginning up some interest for Assassin's Creed. What's the new one called? I can't remember what the subtitle is for the brand, the one that's coming out this year, because they changed it, right? It was changed from what Kotaku broke as the name, and then Syndicate? I think Syndicate. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe you saw that as a run-up to Syndicate. Man, I hope Syndicate's good, because I'm probably going to play it. And it's like, I guess Assassin's Creed, I think, is kind of like my Call of Duty. I'll play them every year, even if I find myself complaining about it year in and year out when we get ones that aren't nearly as good as some of the others. Cool Snake asks, I've been watching the third Big Live show on the archive of Giant Bomb. At some point you utter the phrase, I need some headphones to untangle. Ryan and Jeff burst into laughter afterwards. Jeff says, this is funny for 4 people. What was this all about? Cheers. I've been thinking about that. I've been trying to wrap my head around what I was making a joke about. I'm pretty sure I was making a joke about Brad, because I think Brad would spend some of his time on the Bombcast just like sitting there entangling headphones. I want to say that's the case. That's the closest I can come to as to why I would have made that crack. I'll think on it some more, and if something else comes to mind. But I'm pretty sure I was making fun of Brad. Let's just say I was making fun of Brad. That feels like that's the way to go with this, regardless of what the actual truth of the matter is. Anonymous asks, hey, can Katie playing games with you, guiding her, be a thing? Love the Spelunky video. Next up, Dark Souls. I'm glad people are really enjoying her diving into Spelunky. It's warmed my heart to watch her get into Spelunky. She actually spent... she asked me, is there a way I can play Spelunky when we're not doing it on streams? And so I set her up with my Vita and a copy of Spelunky, and she got to the jungle again on her own, no guidance. She died immediately. So I think I need to unlock the shortcut for her so she can kind of experiment in the jungle, get used to some of the enemies there. But I'm hoping that at least once a week we can check in with her and play some Spelunky, because it seems like people are really enjoying watching her go through the Spelunky learning curve. And it's fun for me to sit and watch and commentate and rib her about her Spelunky play, as opposed to being the person that is actually doing the spelunking. So if you haven't seen those videos, they're on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/PatrickKlubik. We've done 2 of them so far in which she's been playing. And then I also want to do some Spelunky streams where I download some custom-made levels and kind of run through those. So look forward to stuff like that in the future. And she is encouraged by all of your encouragement. So if you want to let her know about that, you can tweet at her at Kate the Shark on Twitter. She definitely appreciates that. Miglet says, no Patrick Klubik at E3. Will you at least do daily videos? I'd really like to hear your thoughts on the major press conferences. Yeah, if you haven't heard, and maybe I'll do a separate video on this at some point, I will not be at E3 this year. I'm going to be part of the Kotaku's home team. I had sort of talked about not going when I was in New York for a big Kotaku meeting right after I signed on to the site, and they took it seriously. So my streak is going to be broken. I will not be at E3 2015. The first time I won't be at E3 since E3 1998. It's a mixture of sadness and, I'm okay with watching the press conferences from a web stream. I'm kind of okay with that. I can drink some beer and relax at night, but I'm missing my friends, and it does mean I will not be making an appearance on the Giant Bomb E3 podcast video streams. They had asked me. We were going to try and schedule some stuff, but not being there kind of means that I can't do it. But like you guys, I look forward to watching it, commentating, and I will probably do some daily videos or Q&As or something of the sort in which we reflect on E3 in some regard. So I'll figure out some of those plans. Stay tuned for that, but unfortunately, I will not be at E3 proper this year. Let's get to that other one that was I said I was going to get to. Anonymous asks, on Twitter you wrote, still learning how to write headlines in the Kotaku style. Can you elaborate on what that means? The Gawker style headline receives a ton of justified, in my opinion, criticism. So one of the ways I've talked about this in the past is one of the ways that we write headlines is trying to get to the emotional truth of a story. So for example, like when I wrote about PT, in which I was just so frustrated about how Konami was doing this scorched earth approach to getting rid of something that I really loved, and furthermore was sad that many, many people were never going to get a chance to experience PT. I had written a couple different versions of headlines. There was one I wrote that was, something along the lines of the way Konami is burying PT is a real bummer. Ooh. Knocked into my camera, something like that, which is, more along the lines of the having a problem with the lack of archival respect that Konami was having for PT. And then I jokingly wrote, Konami sucks. And then everyone in the Kotaku chat room that we have, where we kind of run headlines off each other, was like, Konami sucks. That's how you feel. That is how a lot of people feel. Go with that headline. And we did. And I feel like that's part of the reason that it sparked so much interest, was people were going, yes, Konami does suck. And, my article itself was not nearly as hyperbolic as the headline. But I think what I struggle with at Kotaku is finding that balance in which you are trying to write headlines to entice people, but without getting into clickbait territory. And we think about this stuff a lot. I think people have some unreasonable notions about modern-day Kotaku that are maybe more informed by old-style Kotaku. But we're very careful about the headlines we write. We want to get people's attention. We want to draw interest to the stories. For example, we don't do question headlines, right? Like if the question can be answered in the story, especially if it's yes or no, you're not allowed to write a headline like that. And we take that stuff really seriously. But it doesn't mean we always get it right. And it does mean that, Gawker stuff is aggressive. I have, disagree with some of the ways that various Gawker sites have handled their headlines in the past. And even now that I'm there, I disagree with some of that stuff, because that's natural and that's normal. And I'm trying to find and straddle the line between what makes me comfortable and what isn't misleading and what isn't clickbaity, or what people kind of call and consider clickbait, but that also is trying to drive interest to my stories. And so I'm not always going to get that right, and in some ways I'm going to get that really wrong, as I talked about at the top of the video. And I appreciate people keeping me honest about that. Let me know. Tell me that. I'm happy to talk you through my process, talk through criticism. That is part of why I do these videos. It's part of why I enjoy interacting with the community we're building. And I try to pride myself on someone that's unafraid to have those conversations. So, I think to get to the heart of the question, it's, the way I describe it is getting to the emotional truth. How do real life people react to the story? How do they feel about that story? And how does that collide with the newsworthiness within? And I think that's a little bit of what we go for as a site, and sometimes we get it right and sometimes we get it wrong. All right, last question. Anonymous asks, hello Patrick, have you played the Telltale games? Life is Strange is my first one. It's not a Telltale game, but I get what you're saying. It's a Telltale style adventure game. Square Enix actually publishes Life is Strange. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on The Wolf Among Us or some of the others. The Wolf Among Us describes itself as a gritty, violent, mature adventure game, which almost sounds like satire, but I'm guessing it's not. Do you think it's worth playing, or is it just one of those games that seems to represent more of a young teenager's idea of maturity? So if you're going to play anything from Telltale, The Walking Dead Season 1, got to imagine it still holds up really well. I know that we at least have enough distance from it now that there's not as much hyperbole Game of the Year discussion happening around The Walking Dead. But The Walking Dead Season 1 is truly feels like a mature adventure game in which the choices you make are constantly in a gray area. There's no good, there's no bad, there's just, this is a messed up situation. Make a choice, because making a choice is required to survive and move forward. The Wolf Among Us I thought was okay. It had a really strong start in episode 1 and kind of redeemed itself a little bit towards the end. I love the premise. I think when it was told to me of like, ooh, it's a dark, gritty fantasy characters reinvented and they're living in New York, like that made me roll my eyes. Nothing about that sounded interesting. But I think they handle it really well. I actually do. I think they make good on what sounds like a pretty mediocre premise. But I would, Game of Thrones I'm also enjoying quite a bit. The presence of characters from the show kind of throws me off because it's just kind of weird and feels a little bit shoehorned in a way. And just seeing people on TV and then seeing them modeled in a game just is bizarre. It just doesn't really work for me. And I wish it was all just kind of original characters in the same way that The Walking Dead generally works. There's some crossover, but not really. So I guess Life is Strange, if you're enjoying that, I would highly recommend you maybe move over to Walking Dead Season 1. It's excellent. And if you enjoy that, you should be paying attention to Firewatch, which the principal design folks behind Walking Dead Season 1 split off after that and are now working on a first-person adventure game called Firewatch. It looks excellent and comes out sometime later this year, I think. But that's going to do it. That's 3 Beers Deep for this week. You can submit questions in the future to patrickklubik.tumblr.com. If you'd like to listen to an audio version of this, you can look up Inventory Management on iTunes. That's sort of my catch-all audio feed for the things I talk about. There's lots of stuff that goes up there. I haven't had any interviews lately just because most of my interview subjects have asked to not have the interviews released, so I can't really do that. If you don't want to use iTunes, if you go to inventorymanagement.simplecast.fm, you can there's an RSS feed where you can drop that into your favorite podcast app. You can stream the episodes. You can download the episodes. I got you covered in every single way. And I will see everyone next Monday with another batch of questions. See ya.